episode of Cold Fusion. When the name Olympus is brought up in the context of corporations, what comes to mind? It's probably the image of a quiet Japanese company that makes cameras. But what about a decades-long running fraud? Well, that's the stuff of banks, oil companies, and large corporations, not the unassuming Olympus. But in reality, they did commit the largest fraud in Japanese history. Much like the previous scandals we've discussed on Cold Fusion, this cautionary tale is an unwelcome light shone upon the internal struggles within large corporations, the people who run them, and the ongoing pursuit of profit and power. It's also the story about how one man chose to do the right thing and uncovered a multi-billion-dollar crime. This is the tale of the Olympus fraud scandal.
You are watching Cold Fusion TV.
While Olympus is mostly known for their cameras by the general public, the Olympus Corporation is heavily in the business of precision optics and imaging technology. Established in 1919, Olympus was initially known as Tikachi-ho Seisho Husho, focusing on the production of microscopes and thermometers. The spirit of innovation was embedded in the company's DNA from the beginning. In 1936, Olympus introduced the Olympus One, its first camera, and this would establish the company's footing in photography. However, the company's innovation ambitions were not just limited to optics. Although it had begun in scientific equipment, it wasn't until the 1950s that Olympus took its first steps into the lucrative field of medical equipment. It all started with the gastro camera, the predecessor to the modern endoscope. This move revolutionized the field of medicine and helped to establish Olympus as a leading player in the industry. After officially changing its name to Olympus, the company began releasing one innovative advancement after another, from launching the revolutionary pen camera series in 1959, which introduced the world to the half-size 35mm film format, all the way to introducing the world's first digital microscope in 2001. Olympus was continually redefining boundaries. The company's foray into digital photography in the late 1990s and early 2000s highlighted its adaptability to changing market trends. By the dawn of the 21st century, Olympus had grown into a multifaceted corporation with a healthy business in science, imaging, and medical sectors. They were a trusted name, known for their reliability, innovation, and commitment to helping improve people's lives. This is why uncovering a significant financial fraud scandal was so unexpected. This was a company that had survived the Great Kanto earthquake of 1923, World War II, numerous economic downturns. Olympus wasn't just a corporation, it was an institution, a testament to Japanese resilience and innovation, and this made the scandal all the more shocking. It wasn't just about numbers, it was a breach of trust, a use of Weasley cover-up tactics, and a blow to a symbol of Japanese corporate success. Here's how it all began. Inside the high-rise Olympus office buildings, a culture of corporate deceit had long been in operation. Now, it all started with a desire. In the 1980s, a lot of Japanese companies were struggling to make money from their exports, and this was thanks to their strong currency, the Japanese yen. Olympus executives wanted the company to appear stable and prosperous, and if it took a few shortcuts to get there, so be it. Olympus executives began artificially inflating the company's books, distorting the reality of its financial health. Toshio Shimoyama, who was the Olympus president from 1984 to 1993, spoke to the Nikkei industrial newspaper in 1986, and here he said something interesting. He revealed that Olympus had to resort to financial engineering to make ends meet. In other words, the company invested in financial derivatives and other risky ventures to try and make some cash. Unfortunately for Olympus, the Tokyo economic bubble burst in the early 1990s, so their financial engineering plan didn't work out so well. In 1991, Olympus had lost $84 million on their investments after the boom times had ended. Financial results from October 1999 revealed that they had lost $123 million by playing in interest rate and currency swap markets. To give you an idea of how desperate the company ended up being, they lost a further $22 million in a Ponzi scheme. Over time, the losses kept piling up, reaching in excess of $1 billion, but they remained hidden and off the books. This was a bad situation. Olympus needed a way to make the problem go away, and fast. The plan that they came up with was absurd. It was as follows. Olympus would purposely buy up a bunch of companies at inflated prices. They would then use the excess funds within their accounting to cover up the string of bad investments. These excess funds from the fake prices they paid were written down as income. For example, their accounting would state that they bought a company for $10 million, but in reality, they would pay $1 million. The other $9 million would be used up to cover some bad bets that they made earlier. With this absurd plan, they went on a shopping spree and bought more than 100 companies in sectors as far as pet care and DVD production. Obviously, pet care was at the forefront of Olympus's core business. Another tactic was to overstate advisory fees. Olympus paid exorbitant advisory fees to fictitious companies or entities. These fees were recorded as legitimate expenses, but were also used to hide losses. But sometimes these companies were real. For example, Olympus acquired the Gyrus Group, a British medical equipment company. On top of the $2 billion sale price, Olympus paid an unusually high advisory fee of $687 million for the purchase. Not long after this, Japan had a change in accounting regulations. Panicking, Olympus had to book its assets to fair market value. So, to hide the fraud, it resorted to creating off-balance sheet entities to conceal the losses. One such entity was Axis, a dubious investment firm run by Akio Nakawaga, a central figure in the scandal. Instead of reporting its impaired assets, Olympus funneled them through Axis, the fake firm, and repurchased them at grossly inflated prices. Again, using the overpriced acquisitions to cover actual losses. But in all of this chaos, it's difficult to cover your tracks completely, and the deceptive techniques did not go unnoticed. The company's auditors, KPMG, began raising concerns about the unusual accounting practices, particularly the inflated advisory fees, but their concerns fell on deaf ears. Instead of coming clean, Olympus executives did exactly the opposite. They switched auditors, replacing KPMG with Ernst & Young, thinking that they had dodged a bullet. Olympus executives had no idea that the scandal was already unraveling. All it needed was a little push. Enter Michael Woodford.
They say they're going to sue you.
Yeah. Well, if they would like to come to London in the High Court and go through this, then I'd be more than delighted. I'd relish it. Please serve the papers on me tomorrow. Please do it. I would love that.
Michael Christopher Woodford, a British-born businessman, had worked for Olympus since the 1980s. He was a stickler for the rules. He went from salesman to manager, and by 2001 was overseeing a large portion of Olympus's European dealings. But in 2008, Woodford couldn't help but raise an eyebrow at a handful of mysterious acquisitions. The acquisition of the previously mentioned Gyrus Group should have fallen under his watch, but instead, it was strangely handled by Tokyo officials. More specifically, the CEO and president and chair of Olympus, Tsuyoshi Kikukawa, a very unusual occurrence. It was becoming clear that something wasn't quite right. Deeply troubled by the irregularities, Woodford was on the verge of handing in his resignation, but before he could, he was showered with assurances that everything was in order, and suspiciously, he was promoted to head of European operations at Olympus. He was also appointed a seat on the main Olympus board of directors. They were just hoping that Woodford would take the promotion and shut up. Of course, he didn't. In early 2011, a German colleague of Woodford raised concerns over information that they'd seen in a Japanese business magazine called Factor. The article also found several past acquisitions as suspicious. Explicitly stated was the $697 million advisory fee spent on that Gyrus Group deal. The same deal that Michael was supposed to work on, only to be mysteriously handled by the CEO. Mirroring the events of 2008, the claims were brushed off by supervisors, but this time, Woodford would push for more explanation. The story was showing up in publications outside of Japan, and as Woodford's position in the company grew, so did his responsibility and any potential fallout from a scandal of this size coming to light. He penned letters to Olympus's CEO Kikukawa, demanding a response and threatening to resign once again. And yet once again, the company's response was to not address the issues, but instead to promote Woodford. He became COO and president, replacing Kikukawa, who would remain the company's CEO. But the strange corporate behaviour didn't end there. Within 6 months, Woodford was handed the CEO position, while Kikukawa would remain chairman of the board. Woodford kept being promoted, but that's not what he wanted. He just wanted to know the truth of what was going on at this circus of a company. The move to make Woodford CEO was not a popular one. Everyone was confused. Some were just thinking that he'd been given the top position so Kikukawa could have an easy leader to control from the sidelines. This was true, but the reasonings for this move were more sinister. Unfortunately for Kikukawa, Woodford was far from obedient. Using his new power, Woodford set out to uncover all the wrongdoings he had suspected. In doing so, he recovered records of transactions showing hundreds of millions of dollars being transferred to offshore accounts. When he brought the new information to the board, he was met with vitriol. This time, there was nowhere for Woodford to go but down. He was abruptly fired from his CEO position, and Kikukawa was reinstated. The dismissal of Michael ignited a flurry of speculations and debates about the extent of the company's involvement in fraud. It also indicated that something was deeply amiss within the corporate corridors of Olympus. Fearing for his safety, Michael Woodford fled Japan to England. Here, he would immediately begin cooperating with investigators.
There's a complete lack of confidence in the financial markets at the integrity and the governance which exists at Olympus, and for very good reason. Until we deal with this issue, the company is in a very bad and unstable position, and we can deal with it. We just need those directors who've been responsible for these transactions to be held to account, and there's increasing pressures upon them to do so. Normally, if you're acquiring a company, professional advice would be between 1% and 2%. Olympus paid 35%, nearly $700 million, which is almost 2 years' profits of the entire corporation, to unknown parties in the Cayman Islands. Why?
Olympus's efforts to keep the scandal under wraps were undone the moment Michael Woodford was promoted. His persistent digging is what led to his abrupt dismissal, and the dismissal is what drew attention from regulators worldwide. The cat was out of the bag, and on November 8, 2011, Olympus, for the first time, admitted to its fraudulent accounting practices. They acknowledged that they had used funds to cover up losses on investments. The blame was placed squarely on former CEO Kikukawa, auditor Hideo Yamada, and executive vice president Hisashi Mori. All of them would later face charges. The confession from Olympus, however, came too late. The scandal had already snowballed into one of the biggest and longest-lived financial frauds in Japanese history. 19 officials resigned and faced a lawsuit for the massive accounting scam. All board members were implicated in the scandal and resigned at an emergency shareholder meeting in 2012. This resulted in a sharp drop in Olympus's shares. They fell by about 75 to 80%. In response to the disaster, criminal investigations commenced across Japan, the UK, and the US. Sweeping changes had to be made at Olympus. 2,700 jobs were cut. About 40% of its 30 manufacturing plants were closed down by 2015. The stock price did improve as a result, and gradually, as the scandal faded from public memory, the stock today has grown to multiple times of its mid-scandal lows. In response to the mounting pressure from regulatory bodies, Olympus was forced to establish an independent committee. The 6-member committee, led by the former Supreme Court judge, had the task of unraveling the tangled web of deceit. Despite the mounting evidence of fraud, Olympus managed to avoid being delisted from the Tokyo Stock Exchange. It did so by backfiling 5 years' worth of corrected financial statements and overdue first-half results just hours before the set deadline, a slap on the wrist when compared to the magnitude of financial fraud. But it was by no means over. As the scandal continued to be investigated, it brought about a massive shake-up in Olympus's top management. Kikukawa, the board chairman who had handpicked Woodford for his roles, found himself assuming the CEO position once again, but he was promptly replaced. Kikukawa was destined for something far less glamorous. In a rare instance in large corporate fraud, there was justice. In February of 2012, Tokyo police arrested 7 individuals, including Kikukawa, Hisashi Mori, and Hideo Yamada. A year later, the district court handed down a fine of $7 million against the Olympus Corporation. This was for breaching the Financial Instruments and Exchange Act. Moreover, Kikukawa, Yamada, and Mori were handed suspended sentences ranging from 4 to 5 years. In 2015, the Tokyo District Court sentenced a further 3 securities brokers of Olympus. In 2017, 6 former Olympus executives were ordered by the Tokyo court to pay over $500 million in damages. In 2019, a shareholder derivative lawsuit by the Tokyo District Court fined 3 officials a record-breaking $435 million. As for our whistleblower, he was rewarded handsomely for his efforts. He received £10 million from Olympus for defamation and wrongful dismissal. It was revealed that Olympus had concealed $1.5 billion in losses since the late 1980s. But when all was said and done, investigators estimate that more than $4.9 billion was missing from the books. Olympus, once the epitome of corporate success, was now the poster child for corporate fraud. It sent shockwaves throughout the Japanese corporate landscape, and